Hosea. We have pictures tonight, and by the looks on the faces tonight, pictures are going to be good. I think it's going to help people. I wanted to do this. This is basically, make sure they're matched up, yeah. So an order of events. Just what I realized last week or so is those first 2 or 3 chapters of Hosea, it's just an overlay. The rest of the book is an overlay of that beginning part. And it's more of, we're not going to spend huge amounts of time in the book of Hosea after tonight, probably just 2 or 3 weeks, 2 weeks, even though we've got 7 chapters, we're not going to spend 7 weeks in the rest of it. We'll spend 2 weeks, and maybe 3 after tonight. So if this will give you an overview and help you understand it quicker and faster, and we'll see it. We're going to rewind a little bit and go back to chapter number 1. And because we're not actually reading a chapter, then obviously we will not take comments this evening. But Hosea chapter number 1, verse 3, the first 3 verses says, "The word of the Lord that came unto Hosea the son of Beeri in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam the son of Joash, king of Israel." The beginning of the word of the Lord by Hosea. The Lord said to Hosea, "Go, take unto thee a wife of whoredoms, and the children of whoredoms, for the land hath committed great whoredoms, departing from the Lord." So he went and took Gomer, the son of Diblaim, which conceived, and bare him a son. This is the beginning of Hosea, the order of it. It starts with a marriage. There's a marriage that takes place there in Hosea 1 verses 2 and 3. And a child is born out of it. That child is, again, as you know, remember, is Jezreel. The name of that child is Jezreel, and it bears him a son. And I noticed that as I was reading through it again today, that the next 2 children, it doesn't say that she bears him a son. It just says that she bare a child. And when she weaned him, bared another child. It doesn't bear them to him as like this is explicitly said. Jezreel is Hosea's child out of his marriage with Gomer. And so Hosea begins this marriage, and then next after that, it continues on and it says, "So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, which conceived, and bare him a son. And the Lord said unto him, Call his name Jezreel, for yet a little while, and I will avenge the blood of Jezreel upon the house of Jehu, and will cause to cease the kingdom of the house of Israel. And it shall come to pass at that day that I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. And she conceived again and bare a daughter. And God said unto him, Call her name Lo Ruhamah." So you notice there that it just says she conceived again and bare a son. Not to him. Doesn't say to him like it did the first one. She just bears a son. And call her name Lo Ruhamah, a daughter, for I will have no more mercy upon the house of Israel, for I will utterly take them away. But I will have mercy upon the house of Judah, and I will save them by the Lord their God, and will not save them by bow, nor by sword, nor by battle, by horses, nor by horsemen. Now when she had weaned Lo Ruhamah, she conceived, and bare a son. Again, not to him. She conceives after weaning, and that natural process that takes place, and then conception after the weaning, she conceives and bears a son. And this time God said, Call his name Lo-Ammi, for ye are not my people, and I will not be your God. So you have the second part of the order of events is the marriage, and then you have the unfaithfulness, which is mentioned here. The unfaithfulness, which goes all the way through. If you just skip through, and chapter 2, verse 5, as we read before, "For their mother hath played the harlot. She that conceived them hath done shamefully, for she said, I will go after my lovers that give me my bread and my water, my wool and my flax, mine oil and my drink." So she's married to Hosea, the prophet of God, And here is Gomer, his wife, out playing the harlot, as the Bible says here, and is unfaithful and conceives children outside of the marriage relationship. And so now there are these children that are there that are not Hosea's. One is Hosea's, the other two are not. And then the next part, you have this. After the unfaithfulness, the difficulties set in. She goes and commits the whoredoms, and then children are born, and the sin sets in. Verse 6 says, "Therefore, behold, I will hedge up thy way with thorns, and make a wall, that she shall not find her paths. And she shall follow after her lovers, but she shall not overtake them. And she shall seek them, but she shall not find them. Then shall she say, I will go and return to my first husband, for then was it better with me than now." Life was going to get difficult for her. Life is hard, and sin always brings hardness. Sin always brings about a downward spiral in a person's life. And so you have the difficulties, the marriage, the unfaithfulness, and then the difficulties that are the natural result of it is the order of these events. But in those difficulties, when the wool and the flax start to dry up, when the oil dries up, when the money dries up, when the credit card is cut up, and Hosea actually hedges about and says, "No, I'm going to withdraw the funding that he was giving to her." You could just imagine that they had joint bank accounts, if you think of it like this. And in this joint bank account, she is off running out and being unfaithful to her husband and to her home. And she is using the credit card, she's using the debit card into the joint account, and she's living the high life, but she's living it off of Hosea's income and off Hosea. That's what Israel did with God. God blessed Israel, and yet they went and worshipped all these other gods. They were unfaithful in that relationship. And so Hosea and God, in the same sense, cuts the funding. Right, I'm no longer going to be funding you. I'm going to cut you out of the joint bank account. Now you have no more funding to be able to fund your lavish lifestyle, your life of sin. Life gets hard and difficult. So she says, I'm going to go back to Hosea, because at least then things were good and I know he can provide. So there is in this what we called 2 weeks ago, or whenever it was we were doing this, the next one here is the unrepentant return. Wherein she says at the end of verse number 7, she says, when things where she shall seek after all these things, but she shall not find them, she shall say, I will go and return to my first husband, for then was it better with me than it is now. And so she goes back to Hosea. But when she goes back to Hosea, she doesn't delete the numbers out of her phone. She doesn't, you know what I mean? She's not cutting them off. She doesn't delete those contacts from her Facebook pages and from her Instagram accounts, and she keeps all those same contacts, and she goes back to Hosea, but things can get better, and all of a sudden now Hosea is kind to her, and some funding starts coming in, and some clothing, and the money starts to flow, and life is better. And then as soon as things get better, straight back out the door she is to all of those different lovers. The return came, but she came for her own needs. And there was an unrepentant return, which turned into, again, continued unfaithfulness. Verse number 8, she did not know that I gave her corn and wine and oil and multiplied her silver and gold. And what did she do with it? They prepared it for Baal. Therefore will I return and take away my corn in time thereof, and my wine in the season thereof, and will remove my wool and my flax given to cover her nakedness, and I will discover her lewdness in the sight of her lovers, and none shall deliver her out of my hand. So again, unfaithfulness again for the second time, or for the second cycle here, and this time it's like, no, I'm going to completely cut it off. This is completely going to be cut off, and things are going to get really bad. And so there is continued unfaithfulness. And then you have this where there is the divorce papers of sorts are signed. Now, I was looking at divorce in the Bible and what God says about divorce, because he says in Jeremiah, he says this. If I can find the verse in my notes, I know it's here. Oh, next page, go on. Jeremiah 3 and verse 8, it says, and I saw when for all the causes whereby backsliding Israel committed adultery. Now Jeremiah is written to the southern kingdom, Judah. Hosea is written to the northern kingdom, Israel. All right. So he says, Jeremiah says to the southern kingdom, to Judah, he says, when you saw backsliding Israel, the northern kingdom, commit adultery, which is what Hosea is all about, I put her away and given her a bill of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah feared not, but went and played the harlot also. He writes a bill of divorcement because the relationship between God and Israel is pictured as a marriage relationship. When God chose, and there's different ways that it's expressed in the scriptures, but he says that he chose Jacob and he chose Israel and changed Jacob's name to Israel. He chose him and went down to Egypt and was faithful to Israel. And then when she was of age, she comes out. And then when they go to Mount Sinai and they're there on Mount Sinai and the law is given, basically there is a pledge that is said before them that that thou shalt serve God, the God of Israel, and him only shalt thou serve. And they basically said, we will, which is like saying what you do at the marriage altar. When you come before the person that you're going to marry, you say, do you pledge your love to this person and forsaking all else? And that's what they did at Mount Sinai. Yes. We pledge. These are the covenants and these are the agreements to the vows that we have, and we agree to it, and we're going to forsake all others, and we're going to love you and you only, which is what Israel said that they were going to do with God. And then God prepares a place for them. It's known as the promised land. It's the marriage land. It's like he brings them into a place that's prepared, which is the same idea of what marriage takes place in the Jewish culture, where there is an espousal, and then in that espousal or that time of engagement, that there is also then a time that the man will go away and he prepares a home, and when he has prepared that home, he gets his bride and he brings her into the home that is prepared. Which is where Jesus says, I go to prepare a place for you, right? So these things line up. So then he brings this after these marriage vows, they come into the land of Israel, the promised land, and they've pledged, well, we're going to come into the marriage land and we're going to be faithful to you, God. But they weren't faithful to him. Instead of giving their allegiance and serving God, they played the whore and they played the harlot, and they were unfaithful to God who they said they were going to be faithful to. And in Isaiah 62 verse 4, it says this, thou shalt no more be termed forsaken, neither shall thy land any more be termed desolate, but thou shalt be called Hephzibah, and thy land Beulah, for the Lord delighted in thee, and thy land shall be married. There's a connection with the land and marriage, and it's the Beulah land. It's going to be this beautiful thing where there's this marriage that takes place. But sin corrupts that beautiful thing, and then he writes a bill of divorcement. So the divorcement is this separation. If you read Deuteronomy, when they write a bill of divorcement, there's two things that's allowed to take place in that. One is this. You can write a bill of divorcement, he said, that woman that leave, or the husband leaves, but they cannot be married to somebody else. But they can come back and be married again. But he says they cannot be written a bill of divorcement. They go and get remarried, and then the latter husband die, and she come back to the former husband. She says, no, it's not going to happen. That's not allowed. So he sends them away in this bill of divorcement, and they're removed out of the land, which is what takes place. It's like Hosea saying to Gomer, you're out. You're out of my house. You're unfaithful, and you've continually been unfaithful. Get out. It's time to move on. And God does that with Israel, and Assyria comes and takes them out of the land because of their unfaithfulness. And so the divorce papers are written. It says here in chapter number 2 and verse number 11, it says, I will also cause all her mirth to cease, her feast days, her new moons, her Sabbaths, and all her solemn feasts. I will destroy her vines and her fig trees, whereof she hath said, these are my rewards that my lovers gave unto me, and I will make them a forest, beasts of the field shall eat them. So she says, he's going to say, I'm going to completely make it barren. A barrenness is what's going to take place. And then this happens. Chapter number 2 and verse 14. Verse 14 says this, therefore, behold, I will allure her and bring her into the wilderness and speak comfortably unto her. And I will give her the vineyards from thence, and the valley of Achor for a door of hope, and she shall sing there, as in the days of her youth, and as in the day when she came up out of the land of Egypt. And it shall be at that day, saith the Lord, that thou shalt call me Ishai, and thou shalt no more call me Baalai. For I will take away the names of Balaam out of her mouth, and they shall no more be remembered by their names. And there is mercy again. He says, I will yet love her. And in fact, chapter number 3 and verse 1, God tells Hosea to go. Then said the Lord unto me, go yet, love a woman, beloved of her friend, yet an adulteress, according to the love of the Lord toward the children of Israel. God comes again to Hosea after Gomer has been pushed out of the home, after a continual breaking of the vows, and she has been pushed out. God comes to Hosea after a period of time and he says, I want you to go back to Gomer and I want you to love her. Now, what do you think Hosea is thinking out of all of this? Yay! Yes, happy days. I know you guys are really struggling here on a hot, these heaters are really struggling. But you think, just be with us just a little bit in this picture here of what Hosea is thinking. To go back to Gomer after all that she has done, all her unfaithfulness, everything, and yet he says, go back and love her. Go yet again. Love a woman, beloved of her friend. Go yet, love a woman, beloved of her friend, yet an adulteress, according to the love of the Lord toward the children of Israel. And it's the picture again that God comes and he shows his love upon Israel after all their infidelity, all their adultery, everything that they've done. There is coming a time that God will yet again renew his love towards Israel. And in that renewal of love, there ultimately becomes a happily ever after. The most unlikely of finishes always here is happily ever after such a marriage. Is it possible for such a marriage to ever have a happily ever after? The world would say never. But that's not the morals and it's not the values of the Bible. The morals and the values of God is grace and mercy and love, which is so supersede and so far out of the even thinking of carnal man that this could ever have a happily ever after. And it's not just some superficial happily ever after. This is a properly happily ever after. And if this story is played out in Hosea, then no doubt that Hosea, if the first part of the story of Hosea, we say, absolutely, this is true, picture of the relationship of God to Israel, then surely we must believe that Hosea and Gomer also had a happily ever after. Isn't that an amazing story? That Gomer and Hosea had a happily ever after. Look at chapter 2 and verse 19. It says this, and I will betroth thee unto me forever. Yea, I will betroth thee unto me in righteousness and in judgment and in loving kindness and in mercies. And I will even betroth thee unto me in faithfulness, and thou shalt know the Lord. Gomer comes back and repents. Israel is going to come back and repent at some stage. And they're going to renew their vows before God, and they're going to have the happily ever after as God promised. And he has ever been faithful to her, though she has been not faithful to him. And the story is laid out. And the event of Gomer and the story of Hosea, and I know it's a tough night tonight. And I thought I did well with the pictures to help out, and it's still been tough. And this is the subtle little thing that you probably didn't even notice. Now I'm going to have to go back and show you because I spent so long doing this little detail that no one even noticed because you're all falling asleep on me tonight. If you go back to, look at the faces, look at their faces, and then look at the happily ever after. Go back. Isn't that wonderful? No one saw that. No one's, let's go back to do it again. They're sad, folks, they're sad. But now look, they're happy. Thank you. Boy, it's a tough crowd. The kids they're happy. They're crying happy tears. Their parents are together. They're unified. Isn't that the crazy thing as well? because they are unified, even though Gomer loves those two children. If this story is as accurate to the Bible is, Gomer loves those two children as much as he loves his own Jezreel. He loves Lo-Ammi and Lo-Ruhamah as if they're his own kids, and this is a happily ever after. And those two kids, who are in the truest terms bastards, are brought into the family of Hosea. It's what the Gentiles are, brought into the Commonwealth of Israel. It's absolutely what the story is. You and I are just as loved as the Jezreel is, and of the true stock of Israel, that we are just as loved under the God's loving care as the legitimate child is. That's the love of God. Man, he's displaying his love. Oh, tough crowd. We're going to do this with air conditioners next. We're going to repeat the whole thing, and we're just going to put it on air conditioners and not heat, because this was good, folks. Even the pictures, I put pictures. Oh man. Joseph does.
He brought up Jesus as his own son. Yeah.
Oh yes, I was Joseph of many colours there at the back. No, that's exactly right. And man, see, Brendan said this. Now I have to go preach something else. But no. Do you know one thing I love about the story of Joseph and Jesus is that when Jesus was 12 years old, he goes to the temple. This has nothing to do with Hosea now. When he goes to the temple at 12 years of age, and he's bamboozling the high priest and everyone that's there, and then they leave, and then they lose Jesus. Like Joseph loses Jesus, Mary, and lose him for 3 days. Like, talk about heart attacks. And then it says that when they found him, and it says, and Jesus went with Mary and Joseph and was subject unto them, even though Joseph wasn't his real father either, and he was subject unto Joseph, and yet Joseph as well loved him as his own child. Man, I tell you what, that's true. The story of Mary and Joseph. Joseph was a just and loving man as well, which is not without significance in the whole story and scheme of things as well. Thank you for the closing illustration. All right, how about this? How about you find a prayer partner or two? The picture's on the WhatsApp. I suggest you go back and look at it when you get fresh air in your lungs. Oh boy. Oh boy.